How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 1000, and in this video we're going to focus on the remnants of Tropical Storm Julia, which is still bringing heavy rain over a large area of Central America at this time, and determine if we could see the remnants of Tropical Storm Julia redevelop in the Gulf of Mexico and potentially impact the United States and the Mexican coasts in the very near future. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. So let's begin by taking a look at the current water vapor imagery for the remnants of Tropical Storm Julia at this time, and it has pretty much dissipated from being a tropical storm earlier today, where now, of course, we're seeing the convection a lot less enhanced than before, of course, since the center circulation is now well over land and it isn't able to absorb that latent heat for a high amount of convection to occur. However, we still are seeing a heavy amount of thunderstorm activity occur, spiraling around the center circulation, which is causing still a high flash flood risk for the southern portion of Mexico, and we're seeing an enhanced risk of thunderstorm activity a little bit further northward, and these thunderstorms, these clusters of thunderstorms a little bit further northward will be the thunderstorms that will have the most likely shot of redeveloping Tropical Storm Julia, as once the pressure does lower to a point where the center circulation will jump further northward to where we could see the possibility of Tropical Storm Julia redevelop in the Gulf of Mexico. And in terms of wind shear, we are seeing an enhanced amount of wind shear at this time as a result of a trough digging down through the United States, which is pretty common as we head into the month of October. Of course, the temperatures are quickly lowering for the northern hemisphere, so as a result, we're seeing the wind speed along the surface as well as, of course, the upper levels increase at a very fast pace thanks to the increased instability as we're approaching the winter time. So we are seeing enhanced wind shear, which will likely be one of the main things that may prevent this from redeveloping in the Gulf of Mexico, but there's still a good possibility the wind shear could be light enough for this to redevelop. Now, taking a look at the current radar for southern Mexico, and we do see that there are areas where we're seeing heavy rainfall, and this storm right now is moving relatively slowly. There isn't really a strong steering current that's steering it very fast and really towards any direction, so there is a high possibility of flash flooding associated with some of these clusters of thunderstorms, especially since the storm is going to move very slowly, and while of course the storm has dissipated, the heavy rain threat has not, since of course the storm is still fairly close to the Pacific as well as the warm Gulf of Mexico to absorb some latent heat and enhance its convection as a result of the strong winds moving over the very warm waters of the Pacific and Gulf of Mexico. So we're still going to see thunderstorms develop despite the center circulation being over land. So that's something to keep in mind all throughout the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico, southern Mexico, and even extending further southward into Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and Honduras, who still could be in for heavy rain, even though Tropical Storm Julia has long dissipated. Now, taking a look at the rainfall that's still to come through Wednesday, so there is a possibility that the rainfall you experience around Mexico will be even higher, but we do see that through Wednesday alone, you could experience well over 3 to 5 inches of rain in some parts of Mexico, and there are localized areas where you could receive 5 to 8 inches of rain, which will cause a major flash flood and river flood threat throughout Mexico. So if you live in a flood-prone area, you need to pay close attention to that possibility. Unfortunately, we've already have had deaths reported associated with Hurricane Julia bringing heavy rainfall throughout Central America, and this is expected to continue, especially further northward into Mexico, and this could continue beyond Wednesday, since the storm is going to linger around the southern Gulf of Mexico for quite a while. So if I were to show you guys the wind shear map, of course, we're seeing the stronger wind shear now move southward into the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, we're entering that time of year where the wind shear will only increase, which the good news is that will eventually suppress hurricane activity, but there's still a possibility that we could still see tropical cyclones develop, and this is more specifically the remnants of Tropical Storm Julia develop in the Gulf of Mexico, especially since the wind shear isn't expected to stay this strong in the Gulf of Mexico, as there is a possibility we could see the wind shear become light enough for this to re-intensify in the Gulf of Mexico. Now let's zoom in to the Western Atlantic based and take a look at what the European model is stating. So in terms of where the European model expects the remnants of Julia to move, the European model is expecting the original low pressure system to move into the Eastern Pacific. However, like I said, the thunderstorms that are on the northern side of Julia at this time will eventually take over as being the main area where we could see Tropical Storm Julia develop and the pressure lower enough for Tropical Storm Julia to move into the Gulf of Mexico and have the center circulation pretty much jump from this area up towards the Gulf of Mexico, where all the energy will be circulating around. As we can see, the European model does develop at least a surface level low in the Gulf of Mexico, but doesn't really develop anything definitive. But the European model does take a borderline, if not low end tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico by late this week. So there is that possibility we could see Tropical Storm Julia re-intensify, and I'm not sure if this will actually be considered Tropical Storm Julia. I think it will be, because of course this thunderstorm activity is directly associated with Tropical Storm Julia, but at the same time the original center circulation will move most likely towards the Pacific. So we're gonna have to wait and see if this will be considered Tropical Storm Julia. But whether it's considered Tropical Storm Julia, Tropical Storm Carl or not, you still should expect a heavy amount of rain associated with the remnants of Tropical Storm Julia, and we could see it again re-impact the southern Mexican coast. Now, you're probably wondering, will this move up northward to where maybe Texas could get involved with some impacts? Well, I see that as definitely less likely at this point, because the steering currents won't really turn this northward for the most part. Let me actually show you guys the 12Z run of the European model. We do see that the European model does take a little bit northward before eventually turning it southward, and there are several reasons why. Because as this trough moves through the United States, we're going to see a big jet stream dip, and that jet stream dip will sort of create a northwesterly flow over this storm, especially in the upper levels, for this storm to eventually move southward along with the northwesterly flow. And there's going to be a ridge that's going to be located just to the west of this low pressure system that's also going to try to steer it southward before it could move very far northward. Let me actually show you guys that in the upper levels, in the upper level wind shear map. So we do see that where the air pressure is at 200 millibars, we do see that there is a decently strong northwesterly flow in the upper levels, and that will contribute in steering the storm a little bit further southward and a little bit further eastward as well, where we do see it again move into the Yucatan Peninsula. And we do see and of course it's going to be helped by the fact that there's going to be an upper level high that's going to be located just to the east of it, and you see the wind shear is weak, just weak enough to where we could see this redevelop into a tropical storm. That's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities. And if we were to take a look at the lower levels of steering flow, we're going to see that there's going to be a ridge that's going to be just to the east, just to the west of it, that's going to try to steer the storm southward, and this trough won't really be strong enough, and in fact will only help this storm move a little bit further southward before it can move northward. And the GFS model pretty much agrees with that. There's going to be a ridge that's going to be just so west of it, and this trough that's going to pass by is going to bring a northwesterly push that's going to push the storm southeastward most likely. So the chance that this does impact Texas, I'd say, is minimal at this time, but we maybe could see it if this does move far north enough, maybe we could see this maybe bring some isolated showers towards the extreme southern portion of Texas. But I find it unlikely that you guys will get directly impacted by potential Tropical Storm Julia if it were to develop in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, like I said, the wind shear could be just light enough for this to redevelop, because we do see that while the wind shear is a little bit stronger for the Gulf over the Gulf of Mexico right now, we do see it subside right around the southern Gulf of Mexico for this to have the potential to reorganize itself. And we do see an upper level high eventually move to the southern Gulf of Mexico. So this could redevelop, but it's still going to be a very close forecast because it's not so isolated away from the stronger upper level winds that it will completely organize. There's still a possibility the trough that this jet stream dip could move south enough to where it makes conditions more hostile than usual. That's still certainly a possibility. So we're just going to need to wait and see how the wind shear will be like. But the wind shear, the lack of wind shear possibility could make it certainly possible for this to develop. However, another thing that it's going to have to contend with is that there's likely going to be dry air that's eventually going to move into the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, as this trough moves through, there's going to be a lot of cool and stable air behind it. And of course, the winds along the surface will be a lot stronger to steer a lot of that dry air further westward into the Gulf of Mexico, which I think will be the main catalyst that might prevent it from redeveloping into Tropical Storm Julia. And so which would definitely be good news if there's just enough dry air to prevent that from happening. At this point, it seems a little bit more likely that we won't see a tropical storm, but it's still, I'd say, almost right around a moderate chance that we could see a tropical storm, maybe 40% chance in the Gulf of Mexico. But the dry air is going to be something it's going to have to contend with. We're going to need to see how much dry air eventually moves into the Gulf of Mexico, and I'll say we'll get that answer right around Wednesday by midweek. So we won't need to wait too long before we can say with certainty whether we'll see Tropical Storm Julia redevelop in the Gulf of Mexico or not. But regardless, if this does develop, Central America and southern Mexico especially should expect extremely heavy rainfall, and this could be definitely very impactful for you guys. If we were to take a look at the total accumulated rainfall, let's go over the next 5 days. We do see a large area of southern Mexico expected to receive right around 3 to 5 inches of rain, and this extends southward into the Central America area as well. And of course, rivers are already high thanks to Hurricane Julia making landfall, and this rainfall over the next several days will only add insult to injury, as a major flood threat all throughout Central America is likely. So if you live in near a flood prone area, you need to take the right precautions to be safe from the floods. Now, taking a look at the chance the National Hurricane Center is giving this to develop, it's currently a low 30% chance. It's on the upper end of low though, so I wouldn't be surprised if we could see that chance increase or completely decrease by tomorrow. So we could either see a moderate chance this develops or an even lower chance this develops. Hopefully it's a lower chance, but we're just gonna have to wait and see how the computer models depict how much dry air will move into the Gulf of Mexico, because that will be key in determining if this does redevelop or not. Now, taking a look at what the ensemble members are stating when it comes to the remnants of Tropical Storm Julia, the GFS model does expect it to move to the Gulf of Mexico, but doesn't really expect much strengthening. And I'll say that if it does develop into a tropical storm, it likely won't develop anything more than, let's say, a weak tropical storm in the southern Gulf of Mexico, as it does seem like it's going to have enough time over water, and it does seem like the conditions will be extremely favorable enough for this to strengthen much if it does enter the Gulf of Mexico. But it still could bring an extreme flood threat for the northern Central America area. So it's definitely still something to keep in mind right around southern Mexico. Now, taking a look at my forecast when it comes to potential Tropical Storm Julia. So I did list the possibility of Tropical Storm Julia reforming in the southern Gulf of Mexico. I'll say United States threat is less likely. Maybe some showers right around southern Texas, but any direct impacts are unlikely at this time, as it seems like the northwesterly flow will be enough to push us south, just to the south of the United States, and then major flooding. Of course, you need to be prepared for that all throughout Central America for this week, whether this develops into Tropical Storm Julia or not. So we're just gonna need so you guys need to prepare and take the right precautions, especially if you live in a flood-prone area, all throughout Central America. But yeah, guys, I hope you guys stay safe, and thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.